Well, bonjour tout le monde. Good afternoon. My name is Linda Barber, and I'm the branch manager of the Ottawa branch of the National Association of Federal Retirees. Je veux tous souhaiter la bienvenue à notre section d'Ottawa. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which the Ottawa branch office is located is on traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. On behalf of the Ottawa branch, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar from Ottawa Gift of Life, entitled A Second Chance at Life. We welcome quite a few presenters for you today. We've got Ken and Sally Douglas, who are originally from Scotland and immigrated to Canada in 2004. Ken is a retired Army officer, and he's been working with the Public Health Agency for the last 12 years. They have 2 boys, and they live in Chelsea, Quebec. And Ken received a double lung transplant in Toronto in the summer of 2015. And Sally's just recently launched a consulting company. So we welcome both Ken and Sally. We also have presenter Laura Bradley. Laura received a heart transplant when she was a young teenager. And initially, she didn't talk about her experience, but she's found her voice, and we're really glad she has. And now she advocates for organ donation whenever possible. She enjoys writing about her experience of having a heart transplant, and you can check this out at her on her blog. I think we're going to put it in the chat. There it goes in the chat, hearttransplantblog.com. She writes about her experience having a heart transplant and what life is like afterwards, and the new medical side of life that you get to experience. And her hope is to show you how incredible organ donation is, and to help those who may be experiencing something similar. Welcome, Laura. And then we have Rhonda Tebow, a retired payroll manager living in Ottawa, who is a living organ donor. Rhonda donated a kidney to her son in November 2020, and she looks forward to sharing her and her son's transplant experience. He even recently had COVID, we found out before this presentation, but he's doing very well now. Welcome, Rhonda. And finally, we have Roger Presseault. Roger is from a donor family. His 23-year-old sister, Annik, sadly passed away from a brain aneurysm on June 19th, 2000. She was a multiple organ donor. Since joining the Trillium Gift of Life Network as a volunteer in 2003, Roger's had the privilege of being a voice for those who can no longer stand up and be heard. To this day, he has taken part in over 350, so I guess we're 351, speaking engagements at governments and local organizations, churches, schools, and hospitals. So welcome, Roger. Veuillez noter que le webinaire aujourd'hui sera présenté en anglais, mais la participation bilingue est toujours encouragée. Now, I want to give a special welcome here to anybody who's not yet a member of our association. The idea behind inviting you to come and try them out is we hope you'll decide to join us. After today's webinar, we're going to send you all an email with instructions about how to access the recording of the webinar, and also how to join the association if you're interested. And remember too, to our members in the audience, you can invite non-members to come to any webinars, and hopefully they will try us out. There's going to be a question and answer period at the end of the webinar. So please type your questions into the Zoom chat box throughout the session as ideas occur to you. And then when we get to the end, we will read them aloud. So I'm going to stop here and turn it over to our terrific presenters. And I thank them so much for giving their time to us today. And I think it's Ken first. Oh, Ken, you're on mute. You're still on mute, Ken. Ah.
Sorry, I thought I'd start off, somebody's always on mute, so I thought I'd get that on, get that out of the way. Hi, everybody. Great to chat. It's lovely to see the others involved in this kind of ecosystem of transplants. I've not met any of you. It was fascinating just listening to you chatting at the beginning. I'm here with my wife, Sally, who will chip in. She's sitting there, probably going to wave. We're both working. This is part of the gift of life. We're both back working, and I'll come on to that in a minute. And that's really the story, is that extraordinary gift of life for me and for many others, and where organ and tissue donation fits into that. So is there am I presenting my own slides, or is there somebody, should I share a screen, or?
Ken, if you're okay sharing your screen, you have access now to do so.
Okay, great. I'll do that. Can you see that okay?
That's perfect.
Okay, so I've just started with an image. I'm not going to have a whole lot of facts and figures. It's really a bit of storytelling about our experience, and I'm really fascinated to hear from the others. So my background is I was, a very active kid, an adult, hill runner, rugby player. I was an army officer in infantry, so I was a little running around. And led a very, healthy kind of normal lifestyle. And we'd emigrated to Canada in 2004. I'd come over with the British Army, did an exchange with Canadian counterparts, had some great adventures up in the Arctic and other places, had a wonderful experience, fell in love with the country. And we wanted to bring our kids up here, so we emigrated. And around, I guess, 2008, just started going downhill, and long story short, I was diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is a scarring of the lungs, and the idiopathic bit is they don't really know why. But ultimately, what happens is the lungs, which are really sponges, become stiff and hard and aren't able to do their job. And if you can't breathe, that there's obvious consequences of that. So that's a picture of me in 2015, which is the year that I got my transplant. As it says on the slide there, I was down to 18% lung capacity. So that what life looks like then is you're gasping for air, brushing your teeth, you're breaking everything down into small, very small boundaries, walking from one chair to the next. Using a wheelchair to get around, and waiting, as many are right now, for that call for an organ to become available, or organs, in my case lungs, 2 lungs, to become available. So spent 2 years, and I know we were talking a bit about waiting list, but I was 2 years on that so-called waiting list, during which time we had 3 false alarms, which meant going all the way to Toronto from Ottawa. We were staying, and in one case being prepped for surgery and being about to wheel in, and then the doctors deciding the lungs weren't good enough, it wasn't worth the risk, so standing down again. So in itself, a sort of stressful couple of years. And I just put the walls are closing in because that's kind of how it felt. And I'll just ask Sal to speak a bit about the family, because this is, it is not a solo sport. It's it's very much a family's journey. Sal. Need to unmute Sal. Still muted there, Sal. There you go.
Sorry, it wasn't letting me unmute myself. I think one of the things that I remember that really puts into perspective what life became like for Ken is when I think about him making breakfast for the boys. I can't tell you how stubborn this man is. So when I suggested that maybe I should do this for him after a time, there was no chance he was going to let me take over the responsibility. Breakfast for the boys was very much something that Ken always did. As his health deteriorated, that task became more and more difficult. Sorry. He would put chairs around the kitchen, and he would crack an egg into a frying pan and sit down to catch his breath. It was very, very difficult. The wait was long, but worth it. I'll pass it back to you, Ken.
So that's the before and after picture, and that I still have that T-shirt and I wear it. There's more holes than the T-shirt left, but I think all those who've been involved in this, the ability to try and stay positive and be glass half full is so important. But that picture was taken not long after my transplant, obviously coming out of the hospital and a bit of rehabilitation. So absolutely transformative, and not just for me, but for my family, for the boys. So, there are, in a parallel universe, it's another person who dies on the waiting list, and it's another funeral. And to be given that gift of life, these pictures are from 2 years later, where I worked towards the Ottawa race weekend with my two boys. And then from there, I've really just gone from strength to strength. I'm almost 7 years out now in terms of having that gift of life and being able to lead a life again. And my kids who were young at the time are now 20, 21 years old and living their lives and having dad around still. These are all post-transplant life pictures. And I also do, I take the opportunity, which is why I could never turn down an opportunity like this, just to speak with people, because it's unless you have somebody or somebody or something high profile happens that brings it up to the attention. It's not a conversation people have. Organ donation isn't something that people talk about. So it's lovely to have this opportunity to tell a sort of personal tale and listen to others and just raise that awareness around about organ donation and how it doesn't just save lives, it transforms them. Not just for the individual, I hope I've explained that, but for the family and obviously relatives and friends and others. And then professionally, I work as a health agency, so I shamelessly collared the Chief Public Health Officer to help promote organ donation. But it does mean that and I'm now back in, working for the federal government. They were actually very good. I worked all the way up to my transplant, worked from home, and then went back into a job in the Public Health Agency, and I now manage the training development unit there. So obviously the last 2 years have been busy, but able to hopefully make a contribution, and that's all part of still being around and able to do that. And that's all thanks to that extraordinary gift from somebody who I'll never know and never meet. That's the biggest hero in my life, is the organ donor and their family. And then we just wanted to conclude this first bit with a little bit of myth busting. So we've just put a few things. These are sometimes some of the concerns people have or questions they have around transplantation. I know others will speak to other aspects of it, but I hopefully, if these are questions some people ask, that perhaps if I'm on the organ donation list, maybe a doctor won't work hard enough to save my life. Well, of course, life is primacy, and that would never happen. No one would want my organs is another one. Some people think maybe they've got underlying diseases or other issues, or they're too old. I think the oldest organ donor was 98, certainly late 90s. So I think that illustrates that. And I'm an organ beneficiary, and I've signed up to leave anything and everything. When my time comes. Most religions are actually very supportive of organ donation, surprisingly so. All of the main religions. That's another myth that people have. And people worry about the open casket. A funeral won't be able to do that. But of course, that also is a myth. I hope, myself and others here are living evidence that transplants do work. The success rate is very high and getting better and better. I was lucky enough to have my transplant in Toronto, which is a world leader, Canada world leader, first single transplant, first double transplant in the world, and continue to pioneer the technology and the supports around it. Yeah, but some people ask about waiting lists. I touched on it, giving preference to the rich and famous. They have very strict criteria, and it's really around blood type and the need and the size of the organs. In my case, gender isn't of relevance for lungs, but size is, blood type is. And then finally, that one there is that, you know, my family cannot overrule my decision. The family can overrule the decision. So it doesn't happen very often, I don't believe, but this is certainly for me one of my key messages when I'm ever discussing this with. There's really two things. One is to register, because the evidence shows that most family members, most loved ones, next of kin won't overturn even if they were unaware, but also to have the conversation and to say this is meaningful to you know, me as an individual, that I want my organs and tissue to be used by others. Anyway, that's our quick a quick run through, and I'll stop there and pass it back. Thanks.
All right, I guess it's on to me. Thank you for having me here. It's not often you get to present to a group of people who represent what you want to be when you grow up, which is retired in my case. My story, following up on Ken's presentation, I'm also an organ recipient. And yeah, I'll get started with the story part. So when I was a kid, I was very active. I actually grew up just across the river in Aylmer, Quebec. I was involved in soccer every summer, skating lessons, dance lessons, the whole 9 yards. My parents had us, you know, my sister and I, in any kind of recreational activity we could do. And so this came on very, very suddenly. I started high school. I was in my first year of high school. And the first thing I noticed, from what I remember, is that I couldn't make it up and down the stairs. So I went to a high school where we had our lockers in the basement, and every break we would, we didn't switch classrooms. We would go downstairs, get the relevant books for the next class, and come back up to our same classroom, and then our teachers would come around to whatever class we were in at that point. So every break we would have 5 minutes to run up and down the stairs and gather our new set of books. And I was starting to notice that after running back up like everyone else, we were all like 12, 13-year-olds, it was taking me a significant amount of time to catch my breath. To the point where I wasn't able to focus on my class. I didn't know what was going on. I was just there gasping for air for a solid 20 minutes. The other thing that happened is I was unable to sleep. So I finally figured out a way to sleep sitting down. I had a pile of stuffed animals hold me up, and that's the only way I could get any rest at night. So this was all very fast. I don't remember the timeline exactly, but within days, my parents were taking me to the clinic to see what was going on. The clinic actually thought I had pneumonia. So we were excited, we had a diagnosis, we knew what to do, just rest, recuperate, get better. But I believe it was like a day later or something, the doctor contacts my mom and says, take her to a hospital immediately. It turns out there was something wrong with my heart. The next few days were a whirlwind. So I ended up at the hospital. They sent me to CHIO, a hospital in Gatineau. They sent me to CHIO. CHIO, I was there for about 3 days. They didn't really know what to do with me. They just knew I was not in good shape. And I wasn't that conscious at that time. I don't really know what happened, but the stories that were told to me is that they were asking my parents to start arranging my funeral and start mentally processing what was happening. I'm their oldest kid. My sister's 2 years younger than me, so it was just the four of us. And eventually, CHEO sent me to the Heart Institute here in Ottawa. And that's where I woke up. And that's sort of where my part of the story starts up again. I woke up, I was on a machine, which is like something you would see in Star Trek. This was all in 2001, so things were quite different back then. And it was like this huge console with tubes and wires and all kinds of things. And it's a pretty shocking experience to wake up there. And what had happened is my heart just failed. So they called it an idiopathic cardiomyopathy. Idiopathic, again, like Ken mentioned, means that they don't really know what happened. they couldn't figure out the source. And cardiomyopathy is my heart was too big, it was beating too fast, it was just so sick that they couldn't fix it. So what happened next is I was in the Heart Institute. I stayed there for 5 months. I didn't go anywhere. So I don't have like a before and after, like everything occurred within that hospital. The before was only a couple of weeks, and then I was there for 5 months on the machine and working on the rest of my health, because I was able to, they eventually gave me a portable machine. I was able to be mobile. I started cycling every day. I got the rest of my health back up. Everything was doing well except the heart, which was being pumped by this machine. So it was rough. It was a rough experience. I missed school. It happened throughout the summer, so I didn't miss a lot of school, which was great because I was like, I loved school. It was my favorite thing. I was the top of my class and all that good stuff. And I just really wanted to get back to my life. So that was it. Day to day, I'd watch new movies. I actually kept a list of movies. I watched over 200 movies that summer. I did all kinds of things. I played games. I did, it was the best you could do for living in a hospital for 5 months. So October rolls around. I'm starting to wonder, like, I hadn't missed any major holidays, right? So I'm starting to wonder, am I going to be here for Christmas? My birthday's January 7th. Am I going to be here for my birthday? So I was trying not to think of those things, but the one thing that I was most upset about was Halloween. I loved Halloween, and I was like, I'm gonna miss Halloween. I was trying to wrap my head around that. So crazily enough, October 15th, the hospital wanted to send me home to Elmer, back to Elmer. And part of the reason for that was I had been out of my province for too long because I was here in Ottawa. So everyone was excellent. They got me set up at home. They went home, they sort of assessed my home, made sure there was stuff for me to plug myself into, and everything I needed there. I went home, I sat on the couch, I continued playing my video games like I had done in the hospital. And then we got the call that night. So everyone knew that the organ was on its way. They knew, they just had to make sure it was like in good shape and all that kind of stuff. And I believe it came from Alberta. And I believe it was actually a little girl who was a bit younger than I was, who had passed away. And that's all I know about that. And I went back, and it was the scariest day. It was the best and scariest day. Scariest because it was the first time I was consciously going into a surgery, and the other time I was pretty unconscious. And I had no idea what life was going to be like after. All I wanted was to go back to the way life was before, right? So October 16th, I have the surgery. It went super well. I was up and walking that day. It was a wild experience to go from living on a machine to walking around freely. That was something else. And 10 days later, I went home. On October 26th, I went home. And October 31st, I went trick-or-treating for Halloween. So I got my wish came true, because an organ donor and their family signed up to donate their organs. And it's pretty wild. It's not just hearts and lungs like we've talked about, but livers, kidneys, intestines, pancreas can also be donated. You can donate all kinds of other things as well, tissue, including corneas, tendons, veins, valves, skin, bones. That the things they can do are incredible. And just one person, one donor can save 8 other people. And they can improve the lives of up to 75 others. So that's just one donor card sign can do that much good for somebody. And yeah, that's pretty much the whirlwind that is my story. It ever since I did go back to school, I finished my 2nd year of high school. I went all, I did all 5 years. That's what we do in Quebec is 5 years of high school, and then went on to Cégep University. Still kind of figuring things out. I think that's a lifelong thing, still working on it, but I do write about my story at my blog, which they posted in the chat. Thank you very much for that. And working on figuring life out like anybody else. And I love doing it, and I'm happy to be here. So thank you.
Thanks for sharing your story, Laura. I'm going to introduce Rhonda. Rhonda, if you wouldn't mind turning on your camera.
Hi, everybody. My story is a story of being a donor, a living donor. I'll give you a bit of background. My son in 2018, he was having some issues, little things like, you have a headache, or the doctor, he lived downtown, didn't have a family doctor. And so he would go to the Ottawa University Clinic. And they, when you go to a clinic, they see you for whatever you tell them you're there for. So I have a headache. Oh, you have migraines. Here, take this medication. I've just, all these various things, they only treat that item. He had been warned that, oh, your blood pressure is a little high, you should keep an eye on that, but not really told anything else. So this started in 2018. And I want to say November, December 2018, I kept saying to him, you have to do something about that. Just going in the clinic, you're having all these little issues, it's not working. So I finally went to our family doctor there one day, and I said, is there any chance you can take him? First she said no, and then she said, oh, wait a minute, I just had a patient leave the province. I can take him. I said, are you sure? She said, yeah. So he made an appointment. He went in and saw her on I want to say it was a Tuesday morning. And it was the first kind of meet and greet and let's just check you over kind of thing. And when he walked in and walked up the stairs and they took his blood pressure, it was 155 over something. It was crazy. They put him in a dark room, left him there for 10 minutes, tested it again, not much better. The doctor, who I praise upside down and sideways, said, okay, we're going to do some blood work and such. She was very quick. Like I said, that was a Tuesday. She actually called him on the Wednesday morning, and he called me. She called him and she said, there's something wrong with your kidneys. You are to go straight to Ottawa Emerge, and they are going to have nephrologists look at you. But you're to go straight there and be there by noon. So he called me and I said, okay, I'm coming to get you. So she had actually checked the results. This is why I praise her. She checked the results at night from home, which was awesome. Anyway, off we went to the hospital. He was there about 24 hours. They said they wanted to do a biopsy, but it took a bit of time, would take a bit of time. So they finally got him in for the biopsy, I think on the Sunday. We took him back on the Sunday. They did the biopsy Monday morning. And by Tuesday afternoon, he had the diagnosis. And so he had I won't say he still has what's called Iga Nephropathy. So it is an autoimmune disease where the immunoglobulin A, so IgA, builds up in the kidneys and the kidneys can no longer filter. So that March 2019, he was diagnosed. We then were introduced to the specialist, and that's the nephrology clinic at the Riverside site of the Ottawa Hospital, and the appointment started. What he was told at first was he had 30% function, below 30% function, which took our breath away, to say the least. Just to describe my son, he is 6'8". He's a bit of a giant. We call him Andre the Giant. Has always been active, played basketball, just very full of life. And I think it just cut him down at the knees. So we went to all of his appointments with him. We were his support system, taking notes and everything else, which I will tell you is extremely important, so that you can look back. So that started in March. They tried a few treatments to try to slow things down. They told us there was no cure. They told us at that time, you will eventually need a transplant, which probably cut us off at the waist at that point, because it was all shocking. So they tried a few treatments, tried to slow things down. We were told basically in July, it's not really working, not really doing much. So went through the winter of 2019, feeling poorer and poorer and poorer. As Laura says, you start to feel, you just, and Ken mentions, you just start to lose the energy and such. He lost a lot of weight and so on and so forth. So in January 2020, we started asking questions about being a donor, my husband and I. Probably in October of 2019, they just kept saying, we're not there yet, because they can't start the process too early. Because if they started too early, there are a lot of tests you go through as a potential donor. If they start too early, they just have to redo those tests. It was a little frustrating until they explained that to us. So January 2020, we started both being tested. And we have another son who's in the military, and he was basically on standby, quite willing to be tested as well. And at the same time, we were also getting the word out. It was very difficult for my son, Andre, to actually, be asking for a donor. It's not an easy thing for the recipient to do. They don't want to, make people feel like they have to. So I did that. I posted things on our family Facebook page, for example. I told anybody and everybody who's willing to listen, because it's to save his life. So yeah, testing started in January. They do basic things like, they're checking the heart, they're checking your lungs, they do an ultrasound of your whole, stomach cavity and check that everything looks right. Lots of blood work tests. So all of these tests were done between January and about May. And that's what they call first phase. Beginning of June, we got the call and we were told that my husband was probably the better match than I was. So they stopped testing on me and they continued with him. But we were basically told he's a match. We just have to do some other tests. So we kind of did oh my gosh, hurrah, hurrah. And they continued on with the tests on him, only to be told the beginning of October 2020 that unfortunately they had seen a tiny kidney stone. He had had one before, and was told he could not donate, because what they do is they give the recipient the kidney that has, they test your level of each kidney of your function. So if you're, 40% in one function, 60% in the other function in the other one, they will actually give the recipient the 40% and leave you with the 60%. There are two teams. There is a team who takes care of the recipient, and there's a team who takes care of the donors, and they don't mix. So there's a whole team testing the donors and deciding what's best for the donor, whether it's safe for the donor or anything else. And then there's the recipient team who's taking care of the recipient, and they communicate, but their jobs are to take care of their own patients, which makes absolute sense. So unfortunately, my husband got the call saying, we can't let you donate. We can't leave you with a kidney with a stone in it, because what if it got bigger and something happened? And we certainly can't give it to your son for the same reason. We were devastated. I sat down and I cried. But we picked ourselves back up. My first phone call was to say, okay, let's start again on me. So they started the second phase of the testing on me. And that was the beginning of October. Within 3 weeks, they came back and said, yes, you're a donor. So we did a hurrah again, but very cautiously this time around, because we're like, okay, as long as this isn't too good to be true. So they finished tests on me. So a lot of the tests, those secondary tests, are literally, one of them is to check your function, left versus right kidney. They repeat some of the other tests that they had done. They also do the blood match test. So they take my blood and his blood, and we had to go to the hospital the same day. And then they see if there's antibody reaction and what kind of, if there's any antibodies that I have that might cause him problems and vice versa, or if we have similar antibodies that help. So they do that as well. My function was basically 50% left, 50% right. And I had a fairly high function. I think I had over 86% function for my kidneys, which is very good. That test's lots of fun. You got to drink lots of fluids, but it was worth it. And so, yeah, then they came back and said, yes, we're a go. So surgery was scheduled for November 26th. A couple of days before, we had to go back in and redo the blood test again. They want to make sure nothing has changed and that there's no reactions. So the morning of November 26th, I went in, we dropped him off the day before. And of course, this is all around COVID too. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking. Dropped him off the day before. And because they did his COVID test at the hospital that morning, I went into the clinic and had mine done that day. We both had to have COVID tests, just a whole nother layer that you might not have had before, but minor. I went in the next morning at 6:30. My surgery started at 8. We were told mine would be at 8, his would be about 12:30, which is, it's an amazing thing to think I'm going to roll in, they're going to take a kidney out of me, and they're going to walk over and put it into him, which is just amazing. The doctors were fabulous. So they took me in. I got out of surgery. I don't remember what time I got out of surgery, but I know I came to around 2 o'clock in the recovery. And they told me he was in surgery. So far, so good. So I was in and out of it for a bit. They moved me to a room and I waited. And they had told me around 4:30. And by 5 o'clock, I was starting to panic, needless to say. And I'm trying to call my husband and he wasn't answering. And he called me back about 15 minutes later and he said, surgery's done. He's out. He's good. And the kidney started up immediately, which is something that they warn you might not happen. He actually had to keep, I should backtrack. He started dialysis in August 2020 amongst all of this as well. So he did end up on dialysis. They do try to, the aim is to have the transplant before you need dialysis. In his case, it didn't work, but he did dialysis from August to November, 4 days a week, 3 hours a day at the hospital. It's quite invasive of your life. But anyway, they left the port in just in case they had to do dialysis until the kidney kicks in, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time to kind of ramp up. What they told us was it started right away. So they didn't have to do post-transplant dialysis. His creatinine levels are what they test for the kidney, and pre-surgery, before any dialysis, his was 800. Your normal is about 75 or 80, just so you know. His was 800. Post-transplant, when the kidney started up, it was 175. I had a good cry. It was just amazing. I was in the hospital for 2 days. We weren't allowed to see him, obviously. It had to do with a lot with COVID, but we FaceTimed. And he is very upbeat. He also did chronicles on Facebook and on Instagram, so everybody could follow, and shared hospital food and things like that. He came home 5 days later and recovered at our place. Amazing. So yeah, that was 1.5 years, basically, almost 2 years from the time he was diagnosed to the time we got the kidney. We were lucky. We know we were lucky. Unfortunately, there are many who do not make it. And I, like Laura, he shares his story. Like Laura, he does as much as he can to share his story, and we share it like fully. We encourage people, please register. Please think about being a donor. You can't take it with you. A year later, we celebrated the 1 year kidney-versary. He now has a separate birthday. Laura, you might do the same, I don't know. And this is 1 year post-surgery, his kidney-versary. And this happened that night. He proposed to his girlfriend. So, and they actually just bought a condo and they're in the process of moving in, or he would have been here. Actually would have liked to have told the story, but he's painting right now. So yeah, life goes on. He's working, he's taking classes, he's engaged, they've bought a condo, and life is great. It was scary. And you know, I don't like to think about what would have happened if we were not matches. The one thing, you know, there's a couple of things I'll share is that if I hadn't been matched, I could have gone into what was called the paired program. So what they do have, and I know they do it at least with kidneys, is they have the paired program where I could have gone in. If I'm not a match for him, I might be a match for somebody else who's looking for. And they might have somebody who's willing to donate, but they weren't a match. And so if you can picture 4 recipients, for example, and then 4 donors. And so recipient 1, donor 1 might be able to donate to recipient 2, whose donor might be able to give to recipient 3, whose donor might be able to give to 4, and then the donor for 4 might be able to give to 1. And so I think they've gone as far as 6 or 7, might be even more, where they've done these pairs. So you may not be a match for your person, but you may be a match for somebody in that paired program. So that would have been one of our other options, and our son would have gotten tested. But people ask me what the difference is, other than not being able to take Advil, no NSAIDs at all. And I wear a medical alert bracelet so people know I only have 1 kidney. There's no difference. I live my life completely. I drink lots of water, but you're supposed to anyway. And yeah, no real differences. A couple of facts I'll share before I hand it off. You know, things like with the kidney, I was told my remaining kidney would actually expand a bit, grow a bit. The liver, and in his, apparently it does it a bit too. And but the liver is the actual only one that regenerates itself. My neighbor's daughter had a kidney transplant, and you give a part of it, the donor gives a part of it, and then their kidney will actually regenerate itself. And the person who receives the liver will actually regenerate itself. So it's an amazing process with the liver. With the kidneys, as I said, I was told mine gets a bit bigger. My son has now 3 kidneys. Unless the diseased kidneys are a danger, they don't remove them. So when he now has 1, 2, 3. He has a 3rd one below, which he thought was a very cool fact when he started looking at all of this. You know, I've described a bit about the process. The process to be a living donor is not fast. They told us it could take up to a year for all the testing. We were really lucky. Ours went really fast, considering that they stopped with me and then they started with me again. Less than a year for us, but they do warn you it can be quite a lengthy process. They have to take their time. They have to make sure the donor is healthy, that it won't harm the donor to give the kidney, and obviously that it's going to be a match for the recipient. So you really do have to be patient. But you also, you know, as a donor, just have to be available. If they say we can get you in next week for this test, sure, I'll be right there. So my work was very understanding in that I was in and out doing these things. As Laura mentioned, you know, the things can be donated: kidney, liver, part of a lung. These are living donations. So it's rare that a person gives a part of a lung, but it can be done. So it's typically kidney and the liver. So that's my story, our story. My son is doing fabulously, and I have joined what's called the Transplant Ambassador program at the Ottawa General. It's a program across Canada, and we'll be sharing my story and hopefully helping others who are going through this process if they have questions or support.
Thanks so much for sharing, Rhonda. And I'm going to pass over the screen to Roger.
Am I unmuted?
We can hear you, Roger. You're all set.
Oh, good grief, isn't that awful? Thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you my story. I had made, I always make notes when I do presentations. to Linda's point, this is my 352nd presentation I do since joining Trillium Gift of Life in 2003. I lost my youngest sister. We had 20 years in age difference on the 19th of June 2000 to complications from surgery for a brain aneurysm. I just want to walk you through very quickly the timeline of how it all happened, and then I'll share with you the wonderful miracles that happened through our loss. On the 31st of May of 2000, she became my neighbor physically. They bought the house and they moved in, and everything was going well. On the 1st of June, she got a letter that she had been accepted to work for the Ottawa Police Services as a 911 operator, which is absolutely wonderful. On June the 5th, she left for work, and she looked a bit pale. I was off that day, but nothing. You just moved in, so it's understandable that you will most likely be tired. So she left for work, and at 10 o'clock that night, we got a call to attend the general hospital that she had been brought in by ambulance and was suffering from headaches. So we spent overnight, and on the 6th in the morning, we were advised by the staff that she had what they call a frontal lobe bleed, a very minimal bleed that was very clampable and had no side effects whatsoever, and she'd be fine. So my parents came in from Hawkesbury, it was this little town located just 80 kilometers or so from Ottawa, and spoke with one of the best neurosurgeons in the city. And he explained that, look, she's fit. She's a black belt Taekwondo at 23 years old. She teaches Taekwondo. She's in a lot of sports, volleyball, soccer, and everything, and she'll be perfectly fine. She'll walk out of there on her own 2 feet in about 2 weeks. And the surgery was done on the 7th. On the 8th or the 9th, she was okay. She was sitting in bed, and we have been advised that every time you visit her, just ask her a simple question: what's my name? What's my spouse's name? What are my kids' names? And all that stuff. And at one point in time, when I walked into her room, she looked at me. She says, "You're my brother. You're married to Claire. Your kids are Marc-André and Sophie, and don't bug me with that." And I said to myself, "Holy crap, she's back. We're in for a ride here." Unfortunately, on the 10th, the next day, she became very erratic. She tried to pull the tubes from behind her ears, the drain tubes, and then they put her into an induced coma just to allow everything to sort of taper down. On the 12th, I had the power of attorney, so I authorized a trach to be done in order that she could breathe with an assistance of a machine. On the 18th of June that year was Father's Day, so the entire family came in, and my mother saw her daughter plugged on machines, but she knew she was there, and everything was fine. 10:30 that night, I got a call to go in. She had hemorrhaged on the brain. And the next morning at 10 to 8, she was declared, well, bad term is brain dead, but it's not brain dead. It's no more no more connection with the brain stem. So they were going to unplug her. And I said, well, you got an issue here. She's a donor, so we can't unplug her. So we went through all the ring-a-meringue and everything. And I will remember that day because it was my daughter's graduation at school. And it was windy like crazy, and it was raining. So she passed away at 10 to 8 in the morning, but the helicopters could not come to Ottawa to retrieve and harvest the organs until 10 o'clock at night. So we kept her on the breathing apparatus, and they harvested everything that they could harvest except for her heart. Her heart had taken a very hard beating because of the stroke and the hemorrhaging. We found out after 17 years that the recipient of her liver had a second transplant 17 years after. The liver worked for 17 years, and it gave that gentleman the opportunity to do well and to work well. We also got an Easter card at one point in time from the recipient of her kidney, one of her left kidney, and the tagline in it was, "Thanks to your gift, I was able to walk my daughter down the aisle." And I finally connected with one of the recipients of a double transplant, her pancreas and her kidney, who is still doing fabulously well. And they're all in Southern Ontario. We don't know where because of confidentiality issues. We can't find out. One thing that needs to be told about my sister's donation, and it's not a donation, it's a gift, is that she was to be married on the 22nd of July of that year. And she's the mother of she was the mother of a 5-year-old young daughter. So it was kind of traumatic at one point in time, but the gift that she did allowed 6 people to continue on with their life and to get a second chance at life. Like Rhonda said earlier, you don't take them to the grave. And when Ken mentioned about the religions, I can tell you that in 1987, Pope John Paul II said in his Orbit that the Catholic Church supports the gift of life, and that you don't take it to the grave. Make sure that you can assist others in your gifts. I've always started my presentations with the saying that, the idea is not to live forever, but the idea is to allow somebody to live longer. And that's the real reason for organ donations. And I just quoted Andy Warhol. He's the one who made that statement many years ago. And when I see young individuals, young ladies like Laura, to get a second chance at life, and your son, Rhonda, to be able to function the way he's functioning, and Ken, I mean, you're a miracle on 2 legs, my friend, to be able to do this. My hours of my time that I've been spending for the past 20 some years is worth it. And I've been a public servant as of October of this year, will be 40 years. I don't intend to retire, even though I'm due to retire in June because I'll be 65. But I will not, because I do believe that there is a genuine requirement to continue and do good work like we do, and to be able to give as much as we can. Annik's gifts were recognized like everybody. Well, I don't know if they still do it, but my first speaking engagement was at the Celebration of Life ceremony at St. Michael's Cathedral in Toronto in 2003, where there was an audience of about 250 people of recipients and donors, and they recognized those who have given by handing out there's a special medal that they hand out. And my parents were there in Ottawa when this was done for my sister also. So, at the end of the day, I am a strong proponent of organ and tissue transplants and donations. Every single opportunity I have, I will get on the tube, get on the horn, fire off an email, talk to anyone who wants to hear it. You don't want to hear it. Too bad, so sad. You will hear it. You may not like it, but you'll hear it, and then you can walk away and make your own decision. To Ken's point, the oldest organ donor in Canada was 92 years old. And the oldest tissue donor was 104. So there is actually no age to donate or to receive. The youngest recipient of a heart was just under a year. And it's fantastic because today she's 6 years old, she's out west, and she's doing very well. I believe that the unfortunate part is we only hear about organ and tissue transplants in April, because April is the organ and tissue transplant. There's that week that we call NAFR, National Awareness of Tissue and Organ Transplants. And the unfortunate part is that's where it stops. And we only hear the great stories when, for example, and unfortunately, there had to be a humongous tragedy with the hockey team that perished in that bus crash. And there were donations from there, and that made the circuit in the media. But at the end of the day, Laura's story, Rhonda's story, Ken's story needs to be heard, needs to be shared, and needs to be understood out there. And the only way we can do this is through the generosity of organizations like your organization, Linda, and of people who reach out and say, look, can you give me an hour or half an hour? I'll give you the time you need. I'll give you the time of day you need. I don't care. I'm here to just share my experience and to share the fact that I'm proud of my sister for what she did. I'm really proud. She is my unsung hero. You know, I've said before, and we honor these individuals who are in the theater area with Emmy Awards, and we name streets after them, and we do all of that stuff, and then they go on their way and they just don't, and then we go from there. And then there are your donor, Laura. There's Rhonda, who's been a donor. Ken had a donor. My sister was a donor. They are the heroes, but we don't name streets after them. We don't erect statues. We don't give them trophies. We don't make a big splash out of it. But the biggest splash is that people continue with a second chance in life. And that is far better than having a darn street named after you or receiving a statuette in front of 2, 3, 4 million people. And, you know, today, this opportunity for me, my employer, I work for the federal court, and my employer supports wholeheartedly situations like this, where we can go out and vehicle the message. But then again, that's the window we have, and it's called April. After April, very seldom do we hear about it. So I am always available at any given time through Tina, and I can answer any questions and make myself available. I am a francophone, and yeah, I just believe that we all have a reason to be here, and we don't come by twice. So let's make the best out of the first time we show up, and we'll be great. We'll be very, very, very. We're lucky to live in the world that we live. Life ain't fair, but at the end of the day, it's pretty darn good. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and this platform to share with you.
Thank you so much, Roger, Ken, Sally, Laura, and Rhonda. We're so grateful that you wanted to share your stories with us, and you've done so freely, and even dealt with all the hard parts, and you've left us with the message that each and every one of us have the opportunity to save maybe even 8 lives and impact 75 other people in a positive way. And we're so grateful to have your message. And we don't intend to just talk about it in April. We actually asked for this earlier, and we've taped it, and we're going to promote it to our members and continue to make sure they're aware of it. And if we can do another one this fall, we'd be more than happy to do so. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so very much for all your messages. We've had some nice things in the chat telling about how people have been impacted emotionally by your stories. And one comment was how grateful we are that you addressed the age thing, because I have to admit, I didn't, I was wondering, I'm proud to say I have signed up, but I was wondering if anything would be worth keeping after all this. And you've really, really made me feel good about that. So I don't think we have any specific questions. I'm just going to double check, but Aaron, I think, yeah, just more thanks, more comments on how powerful it was to listen to this and have the privilege of the stories that you're sharing. So yeah, lots and more thanks coming in too. So we're very, very grateful. And I hope the members who are on the line here, no matter what you decide to do, you can commit to talking about the webinar that you had this afternoon and at least getting the conversation going with other people. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, well, I think our time is up, and you can be an anonymous, someone added, you can be an anonymous donor, an anonymous living donor too. So, wow, lots of opportunities to, leave to have a legacy, a living legacy, and to have a legacy later. Listen, thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate your time, and you're going to get a message from Ottawa branch following the webinar with instructions on how to get the tape recording, and also how to follow up if you do want to consider making a donation, and of course some stuff from us about how to become a member and hopefully stay an active and happy member with our services. So thank you all again sincerely for taking the time this afternoon and for shedding light on this such an important subject, and to understand that there's things like kidney anniversaries. And we can make that happen for people. And we wish all of our presenters all the very best. And thank you again for sharing. Bye-bye now.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.